A disorganized attachment style is a trauma wound that can drive you to long for love and then push it away again and again. Every time you feel irritated or vulnerable or disappointed, it triggers you to do it. Childhood trauma is almost always the cause of this, and that wasn't your fault. But when you need to manage your well-being by constantly breaking up with someone and then trying to get them back, you're creating chaos and instability, and almost certainly you're giving them trauma wounds in the process. The push and pull generates a trauma bond, where a previously happy and strong person gets so weakened by the emotional abuse, they can't seem to stay away. Can two people swirling in this cycle ever change? My letter today is from a woman I'll call Sabrina, and she writes, "Hey, Fairy. My childhood was tumultuous with a mentally ill sister who was very violent and parents that were distracted trying to manage her. They were emotionally numb, no ability to say, 'I love you,' 'I'm sorry,' or show feelings." All right, I've got the fairy pencil. I'm going to circle things I want to come back to on a second reading, but let's see what's going on here in Sabrina's life. She says, "I was not allowed to cry, and any talk of feelings was shut down. My mother was extremely controlling and verbally abusive to me and my dad. I was very much ignored. I was the youngest, but expected to be the adult. I began drinking at 8 or 9. Woo! It seemed like the answer to all my problems. I no longer cared about the chaos and violence at home. I always began to run away, which is something I do to this day, but in different ways, such as breakups and leaving when I feel triggered. I'm 10 years sober now, and I finally feel ready to have a healthy relationship." All right, so my question is, how do I know when to give up on a relationship? I have tons of fear and a difficult time trusting my instincts, since it feels like my instincts always say, run. I began dating Bob long distance 3 years ago. Of course, I would pick someone physically and emotionally far away, since that didn't terrify me as much as someone available due to my fear of commitment, fear of picking the wrong one again. When we started, he was very into me. I was scared and pushed him away. I would get fear, break up with him, run. So after 6 months of the off and on, he said, "I can't keep dealing with you breaking up with me and blocking me." So basically every time I got my feelings hurt, which was frequent since I'm hypervigilant about protecting myself from abuse. So at that point, I made a decision to grow up. I told him I really wanted the relationship, and I stopped breaking up with him as much. It was still off and on, but somewhat improved. Examples of why I would break up were things like him canceling plans last minute. He can get a temper in arguments and yell, and him being emotionally unavailable, just like my parents. So finally, I feel all in, and it seems like at that point, he quit trying. He tells me he sort of gave up because of the frequent breakups pushing him away, but he didn't give up enough to stop the cycle of off and on. Yeah, that's often what happens. The more I tried to be open, the more he shut down, it seems. But when I couldn't take anymore and broke up with him, he would always come back. I wonder if he's addicted to rejection. So finally he decided not to come back only because he was dating someone new, but that didn't last. So by the time he came back, I decided to go no contact. I didn't speak to him 6 months while he sent about once a month texts trying to initiate conversation, which were ignored. Okay, during this time, I missed him and hoped no contact would eventually help me get off the merry-go-round and move on. It didn't seem to work. Okay. I really wanted an apology for him dumping me in the end, which felt like abandonment. What? Okay, we're going to come back to that. Especially since my son lost his father at the end of the relationship, and I reached out to Bob for support, but he didn't check in on me again for 3 days, and rarely after that. My son was grieving his father, and that was intensely hard for both of us. I thought in a time like that, Bob would put the relationship crap aside. and just be a supportive friend like so many others were. I feel so fortunate to be a part of a 12-step program, and I was overwhelmed at the love and support from so many people during that awful time. Well, yeah. So after 6 months of no contact, I finally got an apology, sort of, a text that said I effed up. Not a man of many words. I took the bait and chatted with him, and then we decided to see each other. We talked like old friends, and it was great. He began asking me to dinner 3 or 4 times a week and taking me to do activities that seemed like dates. Finally, I asked, "Are you trying to date me?" And he replied, "I'm not ready to date." I said, "Okay, just checking. You are taking up a lot of time, and I don't think I should see you so much. I need to date other people." He didn't like that and said he just had fear, but he wanted to date. So we began a relationship. Somehow I knew that was coming. He finally agreed to go to couples counseling, and I was shocked at his change and growth. Couples counseling was very hard, and we talked maybe too much about the past, and we only made it to 3 sessions before he broke up with me. He came back quickly, and this has been a cycle. Now he breaks up with me all the time instead of me. I realize writing this sounds insane. Yes. And it's clear it's not healthy. My issue is he has shown progress, as I have. We're equally responsible for the dysfunction. I'm circling, but it's dysfunction. I have difficulty with trust issues, mainly believing he loves me. He says he loves me, and he shows it through kindness, support, and quality time, except when he doesn't, because when he's dysregulated, he's completely shut down. I just don't know when it's time to give up. He says he sees us getting married, and I recently found out he bought a ring but then chickened out, telling my friend he decided it's not the right time. I would love to have a life with him, but we can't even stay together long enough to complete therapy. We recently started going again, and he walked out of a session halfway through. I don't think he has any ability to regulate once he's triggered. I'm triggering for him because I can be bossy, demanding, and needy. He says he's willing to do therapy and whatever it takes, but this is exhausting. It's affecting my sleep, my work, my ability to be a present mom. Ooh. What do you do when you aren't sure if you should try harder or move on? We do not live together, and his busy schedule is a topic of arguments since he doesn't have more than a couple of days per week for me. When he's trying to win me back, after me saying I can't do this anymore, his schedule magically opens up for me. He definitely has CPTSD and is slightly coming out of denial about the healing he needs. He has a great heart, is a great dad to his son, and has shown a ton of improvement as far as growing and better mental health. Please offer any advice, and I'm open to tough love, so give it to me straight. All right, Sabrina. Yeah, this sounds insane. That's all. It sounds insane. And I'll tell you why I think so, for reasons you know. All right, you gave your background. Your parents were cold to you and numb, and you were ignored. So you had the kind of background that is common for somebody who turns out to have avoidant attachment, or worse, disorganized attachment, where you want the relationship and you try for it, and getting rejected makes you run and grab it, but having it makes you reject it. And I can't help but wonder that now that this boyfriend or ex of yours is, running away from you, that's the only thing that's got you there. And if he would stay present and say, no, I'm really into you and I want to be together, you would find a way to go. I didn't hear anything in what you were saying that some radical change had happened. And I think attachment wounds can be very hard to heal. And the people who do heal them are very serious about not just their healing, but about recognizing their own role. I'm going to go to a tough love zone here. This is emotional abuse. When you break up with somebody over and over again, or you say, well, it's not as bad, I don't break up with them as often, you are an emotional abuser. And I need to say that straight out. I think it is best for this guy to get out of this relationship. I don't know what he is. He's not writing the letter and giving us his perspective. I can see from his behavior that he's trauma bonded with you, at least, that he didn't start out this way, but now he holds on and he feels terrified for the whole thing to end. But he's trying to hold a boundary with you. And maybe he's avoidant too. Maybe he's disorganized attachment. Whatever he is, let's focus on you because you're the one who wrote the letter. So you have a kid. And what I thought was off base for you was to say that he owes you an apology because he broke up with you. And maybe you lived a life that demonstrated your contrition for breaking up with him again and again and causing, there's just no doubt when somebody gets dumped again and again, it will start to trauma bond them and make them crave to stay together and put up with this terrible treatment. But no doubt it hurts them. And I would encourage you to go ahead and let that in, that your behavior is very hurtful. I would say you don't belong in a relationship with anybody until you have very clear perspective on this from maybe a 12-step group like Sex and Love Addicts Anonymous, maybe therapy, also maybe my program, to really take seriously that you have a problem that hurts people and hurts children. And so all the drama in your life from having an unstable relationship, it does affect your kid. I encourage you, not to just displace all the blame and say, well, he just has all these problems. He needs therapy. I think you do, and that's the person who you can take to therapy is you. But for your kid's sake, a child needs to see their parent be strong and have boundaries. And if they happen to witness you falling apart or being in a difficult relationship, the best thing that can happen is they get to see you get your act together and not do that anymore. So not in a million years would I suggest you stay in this relationship. It sounds really, really toxic. It's now two people who are engaging in this behavior and it never goes well. And then there's talk of marriage, it makes no sense. I don't doubt that you have feelings for each other, but that is what develops in a trauma bond, is it feels like this incredibly passionate love. Love is a verb. When you love someone, you don't cause them to feel abandoned just, for tiny reasons. That is not love. And I understand you have trauma and you can't help it right now. I do feel the most responsible thing for you is to not be in a relationship and to spend all that energy you would spend in a relationship working on this and seeing if you can change your pattern. It's so important that you do. You wouldn't want your kid to pick this up, and they do. They have a funny way of adopting our patterns, even when we think they don't get it or they're not paying attention. But they feel it in their nervous system. It feels familiar to them, when they recognize that feeling of all the colors of being in a trauma bond relationship. I love you, get away, all of that. So, yeah, it may not be what you wanted to hear. And this thing about he should have stuck around for your child's sake, I think you should not be in a sick relationship for your child's sake. And there's something odd there, the way you're putting the responsibility on him, that he should be there and you can be friends through all of this. That sounds like, I can imagine, when your ex died, I can imagine that you just sort of wanted all hands on deck and it was very painful and you wanted that to be there for your son. But trust me, the instability of his presence in his life, in your kids, I said him, I don't know if it's a him or her actually, but the instability created by somebody who comes and goes is not a good thing. And so you had asked, how do you know when it's time to shut the door? You know it now. It's time. And you can do it gracefully. You don't have to do it with any kind of condemnation or contempt. It's just not healthy. You can set your boundary and try not to play games with it. And ending a relationship means you no longer are friends. You don't have contact. You two have a terrible track record of friendship and really bad boundaries around it. And so it may be that you never can be. And I know that's sad. I know it's sad. Like, people you're close to are hard to find. But the sooner you get disentangled from this toxic relationship, the faster you can heal from your own, ways, from your own difficulty relating to another person in a peaceful and loving way. And as you develop that, then good things can start to happen and your life will repopulate with great people. But sometimes it's a period of aloneness, and I hope you're brave enough to do it. Set this man free. Just set him free. Even if he argues with you, he needs to not be in a toxic relationship just as much as you do. All right, I wish you well. So if you're watching this and you want to zero in on any behaviors you've got that are self-sabotaging, I've got a free download about self-defeating behaviors. This is absolutely where the rubber hits the road in trauma healing. It's easy. We're encouraged to focus on what other people did. But once we're dysregulated, once we're disconnecting from meaningful relationships, what kicks up in us is self-defeating behaviors. So if you're brave enough to have a look at what some of the common ones are, you might find one or two that are happening for you. You can get that free download right here, and I will see you very soon.